Hi everyone and welcome so much to my channel Karoline Knits. My name is Karoline and I live in Scotland with my partner Ben and my puppy Fela, who might just be visible right here behind me. She's tired after a walk. It's actually the second time that I filmed this video because I've done something to mess up the original file, and I spent all of last night being so frustrated that it wasn't working and that I couldn't fix it, and I was like, oh, like, what can I do to work around it? And I just decided, you know what, I'm gonna take a tiny bit of time today to just film and get the video out, because I feel like I have a lot to talk about, and when you leave it too long between episodes, I just think it becomes a bit much when you don't have to film, and it can almost put me off filming again. So welcome. It's been over a month since I've last done a podcast episode, so it's actually been much longer than I kind of anticipated. I had a lovely Christmas. I spent a bit more time in Denmark. I did some vlogs if you're sort of interested in seeing a bit of that, and I spent Christmas with Fela and Ben, which was lovely as well, and had quite a chill New Year. I'm getting old. And I've been back to work. Sometimes people ask me what I do for a living, and I work at a university, and so start of term is in my job really busy, so it has been a bit of a busy while, and I have definitely had considerably less knitting time after the Christmas holidays have been over. So a lot of this was actually knitted basically just when I was off, and haven't had as much time since. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out my iPad, because there was so much to show that I had to write notes. Now, as you know, I'm not a big notes person, but always good to know what you're talking about. I should also say thank you to everyone who's commented on the 2021 year in review, where I showed everything I'd knitted. I really appreciate everyone's comments and support for it, and it seemed people really liked the format as well, which is always nice, because it felt, to be honest, a tiny bit strange. Not strange, but it was so impulsive to film it, right? I just, on a Friday evening, was like, oh, I may as well just film this, and it's kind of nice to know that I maybe don't have to overthink what these podcast episodes are like, because at the moment I'm kind of questioning whether I want to keep it this traditional finished objects, works in progress and acquisitions, or if I want to slightly rethink how I do it, just because I kind of feel like I'm going to be repeating myself for the next wee while, and I would like to still be able to make videos, but I don't know if I'll have enough to sort of fill up a whole podcast. So if any of you watch anyone who creates some form of knitting content or podcasts, what kind of content do you like to see from them that you think would sort of fit in with my channel? Because I'd love to like try something ever so slightly different. But anyway, today we are doing the traditional format. So as I said, I managed to get a lot done over the Christmas holidays. I will say though, I think a lot of it was also just because I was off and I had the time to do it, and on top of that I had a few projects that were very near completion. So basically on the 1st of January I finished the final project that was on my needles for 2021. So I've actually quite enjoyed starting the year with a bit of a clean slate, and so I'm going to start with my finished objects. These are not in order of when they're finished. I'm going to do them in most interesting, I guess. Well, not most interesting, but you know what I mean. I'm going to start with the more interesting ones. So today I am wearing one of my finished objects. This is the first sweater designed by my lovely friend Lissy behind Hive Knits. This was released on Saturday, so the pattern is now available. Before I forget, I should say that I've knitted this in Filcolana Arwetta and Filcolana Tilia, and both of those qualities are part of the current discount code that Knit has supplied for the release of the pattern. So I'll link it down below, but she's offering 20% off a range of yarns that works for this pattern. So I'll make sure to put them down below and put the code down below. And it's until I think the 13th of February. So you still have some time to use it. So if you're looking, essentially if you're wanting to buy yarn in the fingering lace weight category from the website, now is the time to do it because they're all 20% off, which is such a good price. Hello my baby. I basically had only half a sleeve to go by the end of November, and since Lissy had said that the sort of deadline, or like what was required, the puppy has like snuggled all the way up to me. That's so nice. Yeah, had only required you to have essentially the body and one sleeve done. So once that was kind of done, I obviously was knitting the dress that you might have seen. So actually once I finally got stuck back into it, it just flew off my needles more or less. I have in the past not been too impressed by Tilia, but for some reason this combination I can wear against my bare skin, so I'm just wearing a t-shirt underneath. I am at the tail end of winter, so my skin is the most itchy it will ever be. My eczema is very affected by, like hot water, cold air kind of things, like it dries itself out essentially. So if I can wear it with just a t-shirt underneath, I think I always would. I should say I will put in right now the cutaway of me showing off the sweater, but when I blocked it, I blocked the sleeves extremely aggressively. Like we're talking, I stretched those bad boys as much as I possibly could to get as much length out of them as possible. Being half fisherman's rib, it has quite a lot to give actually, so once you stretch them they will grow. I have obviously knitted it more or less in original yarn, and as you can tell I do have a tiny bit of spring back. They're probably more bracelet length now, one of my long hairs. But I still don't think they're bad at all, and I think that's all the spring back I'm gonna have because I've worn it a few times now, and so far absolutely zero pilling anywhere, which I really like. I was a bit concerned about Arwetta being it's a superwash sock yarn, so it consists of I think about 80% merino and 20% nylon. That superwash element to it would make it grow loads, and obviously I don't meet gauge on this, so I should probably have remeasured as I was knitting it, but I didn't. So I'm at 22 stitches to 10 centimeters instead of the 24 recommended in the pattern. I knitted this on 3.5mm needles, but if I was to knit it again I would size down to 3mm needles. I also think for a lot of patterns, gauge swatching, like if I'm like borderline meet gauge, I think I'm going to start sizing down intentionally. I'll show you a project where I've deliberately done that, just because I think once I get in the groove I tend to knit looser. So yeah, but I don't mind too much. I luckily have a skirt that literally fits this sweater perfectly, and I'm really chuffed with that. I knitted it to the length in the pattern, but it's a teeny tiny bit on the shorter side, but the good thing is being top down you could try it on and lengthen it if you want it. The final thing to say is that obviously Lissy I consider my friend. I think she considers me her friend too. But I really could not praise the pattern enough. If you are an advanced beginner going into intermediate and you're wanting to challenge yourself, this is a brilliant pattern. It does have short rows where you are doing increases for the sleeves or where you're doing the raglan work essentially. However, I think Lissy has she has a good balance between explaining you exactly what you need to do with lots of detail without creating so much text that you don't read it properly and make mistakes. So I think in that sense it's quite a fairly accessible pattern, which I just think is such a big achievement. So I'm so excited to have been a part of it, and it's warmed my heart so much to see other people buying the pattern and casting it on and wanting to knit it, because it is truly an amazing pattern. So the next sweater I have finished is a sweater number 1. I'm just going to have a sip of tea. Sweater number 1 in this bright pink. I will pop in the cutaways right now. So this is sweater number 1 by My Favourite Things Knitwear. It is, I think, actually the first pattern more or less that she released, so it was released before I started knitting. It is a really simple construction. I knit this on 7mm needles with 2 strands of my hair. It's a simple raglan construction. There's no fanciness with the raglan. It does recommend that you do Italian cast on and bind off, which I've done. and much prefer, as you know, that is my preferred. I knit more or less everything according to the length in the pattern. I added, the sleeves ended up being a little bit longer because I knitted I think 3 or 4 more centimetres once I measured them, but I just kept it, and for me they're like not 3/4 and not full length, and I actually think for the way the sleeves fit, that is perfect. I knitted these in a silk mohair from a Danish shop called Sandnesgarn. It's their own mohair, so I've linked it down below if you want to find it. So far so good. It's so far really soft. When I've tried it on, it's quite nice, but it's yet to have its first outing, because when I bought the yarn for this pattern, I lived a very different life, I guess. I didn't have a puppy, and it's probably not the most like suitable chilling at home, working from home kind of sweater. So but you know, your taste changed over time, and I still think it'll be lovely. I'm actually going into the office tomorrow, and currently I'm kind of thinking that I might wear this and see if I can't style it for work. I knitted this in a size L, I should say. I should also say I knitted the first sweater in a size 6. My bust measurement is, as I mentioned in the year in review, I'm probably more 110 centimeters bust size now, meaning that I fall in like probably more into true XL or slightly smaller at the moment than at other points where I've probably been more than a 2XL. And I really like the fit. I think it's that perfect balance between being oversized but not massive. I decided to size down to an L because I sized up a needle size, and I was like, if it turns out a little bit, you know, if my gauge is off and it's a little bit, you know, looser gauged than meant to be, it will be fine. I hated knitting with oily mohair. I found it really unenjoyable. I just find with my hair I can't get into a rhythm while knitting. I just can't get it to move as fast, and it just annoys me so much. So I don't know if I'd recommend it for that reason, but again, really easy and straightforward pattern. So that's already 2 sweaters, which I think is pretty good going for me. Like, I usually don't finish that much. I almost feel a bit like knitting tradition having that many projects to show. However, I do actually have one more. I also finished the marble sweater, which I will have to pop on a cutaway because I don't actually have it with me just now. I didn't realise obviously that the recording would be messed up, so it is currently in the bathtub, soaking wet, ready to be put in a spin cycle in the washing machine and dry. So in that clip I've taken, I luckily recorded that yesterday morning, so I have that. I hadn't blocked it yet. So as I said, it's the marble sweater by Petite Knit. It is a top-down raglan sweater knitted on, I think it's 10mm needles all around, also the ribbing. And yeah, it's a fairly straightforward knit. I think sort of Petite Knit's original design idea was that you'd mix those 3 strands that she has recommended, but I don't know what, like when I see how much it's meant to be, it just shocks me. Like, oh, hello my baby. I just think I think the original yarn ends up being, you know, it'd be like almost £200 for my size, which I was not willing to pay. So I did substitute it, actually inspired by one of Petite Knit's test knitters. So I decided to use, I found a chunky fat mohair when I was in Denmark. I think I showed this in the last podcast. So this is from Gepard Chunky, and I can't find it online. I managed to find it 50% off. I think she was just getting rid of a few skeins because it's not on her website. So unfortunately can't really link to this, but it's essentially just a neutral base with green, red and pink speckles, like not speckles, they're like big patches on them. And then my other strand was Lana Gatto Anise, which I bought from Knit Yarns. This is slightly thicker, and I don't, if I hold it up, I don't know if you can really see like the texture of it. It reminds me a bit of Sandnesgarn coarse in the way it's almost like a chain net yarn. It's incredibly soft. On the tag on it, it says it can be knitted to 14 or 13 stitches. So I'm hoping I could, I'm kind of tempted to try a gauge swatch and see if I could get 14, the magical 14 stitches to 10 centimeters, because something like this would be brilliant for a cardigan or something else that you want really soft. And you could potentially add a second strand if you really wanted to. But yeah, I really enjoyed, well, I found just like with the other mohair, I found knitting with the chunky mohair incredibly inconvenient. Chunky mohair just sticks to everything as well. But obviously it was a fairly quick knit in the sense it was a really simple knit. And I think it'll be perfect wearing at home. I have no itch from the chunky mohair, but I'm also finding that with time I'm becoming less and less sort of sensitive to mohair, and therefore have, you know, less problems. So I don't know if that makes a difference. So that's all the sweaters I've finished, which for me is massive. Definitely the most projects I've finished in such a short amount of time. Next up I have 3 sort of smaller projects. So I have a hat that I finished for Ben, which is down here. So this is, I can actually put it on today. This is essentially the Scroll One hat from Penrose Knits that I just knitted without doing like the picot edge and fold it up. I knitted it in double soft merino that I managed to find on offer in a yarn shop while I was back home because they're discontinuing it. Unfortunately, it's turned out a little bit big. Now, I don't know if I ended up folding, like I think to be honest, it's a tiny bit wide, but also the brim, like the top of the hat is a tiny bit too long. So we've discussed me trying to tumble dry it just to see if I can get it to just, I think it's very little, it has to become smaller. I didn't gauge swatch for this. I bought the yarn while I was back home and I actually cast it on in the security line in Copenhagen airport while flying back, and I kind of had to like knit it on magic loop on the plane because I didn't have the right 40 centimeter needle to knit it with. So yeah, it was a bit of a crazy choice. But I just knew that the double soft merino, for someone who isn't a big woolly person, Ben is definitely not a big woolly person, double soft merino is one of those yarns that are just so lovely and soft. And being knitted at quite a tight gauge, I'm hoping it won't grow too much, but I think I need to tumble dry it. So if you've any tips on shrinking things like hats, then I would love to know. Like, do I put it in the tumble dryer while it's soaking wet? Do I get it like to dry to a certain level of wetness? Like, what program do I put my tumble dryer on? Because I just don't know. But it's also a shame that he doesn't really want to wear it because it doesn't fit. So that's a finished project. There are now 2 projects that I can't show you because they are back in Denmark. I finished them before leaving. So one is the Chunky Baby Wrap, which I should say that the yarn was originally gifted for a test knit that I did a long time ago, and I essentially had 3 balls left over of it, which I then used for the Chunky Baby Wrap, which was designed, or which is designed I should say, by Rikke from Sysleriget. My auntie absolutely loved it, so it's always nice to knit for people who really appreciate it, isn't it? I also made a pair of mittens in Sandnesgarn Chunky, oh god, my head looks like a nightmare, in Sandnesgarn Momi Chunky, which was a yarn that I was originally given by my granny, and then for Christmas I knitted her, a pair of mittens in it. The yarn is, so Sandnesgarn is a Danish company that makes yarn out of Danish wool that would otherwise not really be used for anything. My understanding is that in a lot of these Nordic European countries who are not good enough at actually using the domestic yarn or the domestic wool, because a lot of our sheep are bred for meat, and also just because it's so labour intensive to basically make the yarn, like make the wool into yarn. But what she does is that she then picks up these different blends of Danish yarns and then she sells it. So it's usually quite small batches, meaning that you won't be able to find that yarn anymore, but she'll have other of that kind of idea behind it. And so that particular yarn was from sheep where my granny grew up, and it just felt really special, and I wanted her to have a piece of that history as well. So I gave her those, and that's the quite a few finished objects for me. Usually I do not have that many, but now we're sort of on to still in sort of finished objects, but in a different category, which I'm now wondering where I put them. So I am reintroducing a segment to the podcast that we've not seen for a while, which is the Sock Saga. This is a segment on the podcast where I talk about finally getting over my fear of knitting small circumferences and discovering sock knitting. The last time we had this segment, I showed the mitten that I knitted as part of the test knit Flora for the school run series, and how as I've become better at magic loop, all of a sudden knitting socks didn't seem as scary to me. So I decided it was basically time for me to finally do it. So here is the very first sock that I knitted. So this is the Sunday Socks Junior by Petite Knit. This is the smallest size. I need to knit the second one because this is actually a present. One of our friends just had a little baby boy, and I thought for winter baby, you know, these are socks that you wear to keep feet warm, I would say. I knitted these in Filcolana Peruvian Highland wool. This is the colour Woodland Dawn, which I actually bought for Sunday socks for me, so there might be quite a bit left over, but it wasn't the colour I thought it was going to be when it arrived. It's a bit more of a cooler brown than I think I was expecting. So I'm going to make some more Sunday socks, but obviously you know, you don't actually need very much to knit the socks, so that's very good. And I thought I'd start with knitting a pair of junior ones because somehow it's less intimidating to have a project where everything moves quite quickly. So once I finished this pair, I was ready to tackle the adult size. So I bought the Sunday sock pattern ages ago, and one thing that really attracted me about it is that obviously not Aran weight. I think Filcolana Peruvian Highland wool. I don't know if it comes under worsted or if it's more DK. I think it's more worsted. So quite thick yarn, and that also means that both of these were knitted on 4mm needles. I actually used the same needles, which are down here. These are Addy lace, which I use for magic loop. They have quite a good soft cord, and I actually quite liked the tips of them. They were very, very easy to work on, and I don't know, yeah, I think it's 100cm cord. I know when it comes to things like this, I really like, I'm really growing to like, I should say, magic loop, which I have tried in the past and just could not get on with at all. And I really then decided, oh, magic loop is not going to be for me. And then I retried it when I was test knitting that one. Oh, hello, my baby. When I was test knitting for Laura, and all of a sudden it was like, it just clicked for me. It just suddenly became so much easier. Sorry, I got distracted. How cute is she lying like chest up? Oh, am I not done passing you? Am I not done? So if you have tried magic loop before and didn't like it, I would recommend trying it again. This time around I used a tutorial from Nimble Needles, and I just think the way he explained it just made how you work magic loop make so much more sense to me. When I've asked for recommendations for how people knit socks in the past, I can tell people have really strong opinions about the methods they use most of the time. And I know magic loop is not for everyone, but certainly for me, that's what I needed. I find it's much quicker than DPNs for me, and I get basically no laddering. I don't know if it's quicker than DPNs for me, but I get no laddering from it, and in that sense I find it much more convenient. Oh, my tea has gone cold. Too much chatting. So anyway, they're both knitted on that needle, and this is the adult size, which have worn, I wonder, if it'll show up, but they have like a subtle like shimmer through it, which is very subtle. So I knitted these in Novitas 7 Bilyesta, which I think means 7 brothers, which is an Erin weight sock yarn. So it's, you know, a classic 70 or 80% wool and then the rest nylon. I feel like it doesn't, it almost looks a bit weirdly stretched on, which kind of surprised me. And the yarn is not as soft as I thought it was going to be, so I don't know if I'd use this particular one again. I know it's loved by lots of Finns, and I can already see from, I've probably worn these 2 or 3 times, so they are a tiny bit dirty. I can already see how it's starting to ever so slightly felt around the heel and around the feet, which might be good. I did pick a sock yarn because I think they'll be much easier for me to wear. I should say that I knitted the leg 5 centimeters shorter than in the pattern, so this is only 20 centimeters, because for 25, I think the idea is that basically you're meant to wear them like folded over like that as like a casual cuff, but with 20 centimeters, these are the perfect length for me to not have like cold ankles. So yeah, I asked Simona from Knit if she would order some of Sandnes sock yarn in this kind of weight, because I would love to make more of these socks in actual sock yarn. Like I do have some Peruvian that I will probably continue making into baby socks or to socks for me that are like meant to be, you know, chilling and relaxing. But I would also love to have some that are, oh, it gets all cold now that she's moved, but I would love to have some basically in proper sock yarn that I can wear in my wellies for walks and that I can use to keep my feet warm. I do, after getting Vela, I do spend an obscene amount outside. It feels like I spend lots more time than I have ever done in the past out walking with wellies on and all of these things. So things to make that better or more comfortable is definitely something that I look for. I should show you, I have also now, to continue the Sock Saga, this project bag that I showed you last time has now become the one where I saw all sorts of yarns appropriate for it. So I do have some of this, which is, I did buy some of this before the end of 2021 because I basically was telling myself I wanted to see how long of 2022 I could not buy yarn. So when I ordered the Lana Gatto knees for the marble sweater, I also ordered some Peruvian Highland wool in Merlot. Though actually that's a lie, I think the Merlot was gifted from Simona in a different order, but I have knitted in Merlot before and I just love it. And I also ordered anthracite, heavily inspired by Laura from Penways Knits. So I have these. I think the Merlot is going to become a school run headband, and wherever it's left I can then use for socks, but I kind of like I can start collecting Peruvian Highland wool scraps and they could be used for socks, and you could always do contrast heel and toes kind of things to use up the small scraps. And now that I have the junior size, you know, you can kind of knit to suit that. So there's some of that yarn in here for now. I also have, I think one of my next projects is probably going to be using the Novita DK weight yarn. So I have quite a lot of sock yarn and I have to stop myself now, not thinking I'm going to need all the sock yarn, but just to knit through what I have. So I think next up is going to be this Novita sock yarn instead. So that is going in the sock bag, and yeah, I'll keep you posted. I did find that when I was knitting these that this these kind of like the sock project was actually basically perfect size for me to knit while I had meetings, because it's quite small and more nimble, where it's like towards the end of the marble sweater, you know, you can't just sneakily knit on that underneath the desk and online meetings. So that's all my finished projects, and hopefully this will have a partner next time I see you. I currently, shockingly, only have one whip which lives in this bag. This is also from Sysleriget, which is, for some reason, it just attracts fluff, but it's brilliant because it has these two big front pockets, and then inside it also has like a second pocket, so just so practical for, I always carry my projects all around the house. I no longer have like a knitting corner where I leave all my knitting projects out, because Fela will sometimes pick up just random balls of yarn, but I don't want her to be tempted by my actual projects. And unfortunately, when it comes to puppies, a lot of it is about management, and if you don't manage the environment, you can't really be cross with them. So anyway, I should start by saying that the yarn for this was gifted, yeah, it was gifted really kindly. And if I'm not doing an acquisition section today, because I honestly can't keep track of what I've shown and not shown, and I feel like well, I'll speak about the stash later, but anyway, when we get to the acquisitions, I'll be speaking about acquisitions for this year. So this is one of the yarns. Well, this is one of the yarns. This is the yarn that I'm using. It's sponsored by Sysleriget. And this is the pure silk in the colour Fluff, which is 100% mulberry silk. It runs 400 meters per 100 grams, and its gauge is 28 stitches, sorry, on needle size 3mm. So this is absolutely stunning. So it's basically pink, like it's like a white base with hints. Oh, this has a bit of purple in it. Yeah, it's on a white base with like pink through it, and a few, very rarely a few speckles. So I'm currently test knitting. So this was sponsored for the test knit, basically. I'm currently test knitting for my lovely friend Nina. Just trying to see how I can sort of show it best. So I'm test knitting for Nina again, and this does not look very impressive. It looked even less impressive than last time, or even more. It does look more impressive than the last episode, so there's at least that. It doesn't, yeah, it's taken a while. So this is it. So I'm knitting the office tee, which, like the office sweater that you may have seen me talk about before, it has essentially start with like a saddle shoulder up here that then moves into like a raglan. So when you do the saddle shoulder, some of it is also short row, so that it's slightly higher up in the back. The neckband is knitted in knit one tabular pearl one, so on the inside you can see it's just normal, but on the outside it gives that sort of twisted rib look, and you cast on with tabular cast on. I am knitting this on 3mm needles. I bought this particular set from Knit Yarn, so I bought the ginger needles from her when I ordered, because I find that anything under, I've been fine with 3.5mm, but anything below that, I find that interchangeables have a tendency just to untwist itself and it's smaller needles, and because this is pure silk, I didn't want to risk accidentally you know, losing all my stitches essentially. I'm not currently changing over the yarn very well. I might do a bit of a faded over when I get to the tail end of the ball, but I like to live life on the edge, and I can't see myself knitting every other row into different balls of yarn. It's just way too much management for me. This is, even though it doesn't look like it, this is a lot of knitting. As I said, I've not had that much knitting time recently, and so it hasn't grown as much as I'd hoped, but it just takes a long time on the small needles. And I've been struggling a little bit with guilt, because quite a few of the testers are almost done, and I'm just like, oh, why have I not further as of yet? But I'm not, so here we are. But yeah, I can't wait to show you the more progress. I also messed up my short rows, which is so annoying, but anyway, I'm hoping to show you more next time. I'm less than halfway through the raglan increases, but once I've split for sleeves, it should move pretty quickly, and I'm kind of hoping it can become a bit of a mindless knitting project. I did have a few struggles to start with, because the neckline is knitted on 2.5mm needles. So I didn't have that, so I bought, as I said, I quite like the Addy lace ones for the socks. I was like, when I saw that they had a 40cm one of the Addy lace, I was like, that's perfect, I'll buy those. For some inexplicable reason, whenever I cast it on these, it was like once it got over that initial join, I couldn't move the stitches on the needle at all, and I basically had to cut off my cast on. And I think I tried 4 or 5 times and I couldn't cast on to this at all. So I was like, well, it's clearly something with these needles, or yeah, it was. So then the only other 2.5mm needles I had in my stash are these pony needles. I think are 80cm cord, maybe. I think I ordered these from No Frills Knitting back in the day. I really rate these pony needles. They're quite cheap, but they're cheap and cheerful. I've never had any major issues with them. Pony's cable is always nice and squishy. They're pointy enough. So I managed to cast on fine on these, and I managed to get started. But then I had to do it magic loop, which did cause some laddering, and still in this, which again, just where the join is, I can see, I think it will block out. I think it's a tension thing. But there is ever so slightly a line, even still down where I joined, where it's just not knitted, like it's just looser for some reason. So yeah, joining magic loop wasn't a major hit. And then I'd also messed up, so when you do the Italian, like, or tubular cast on, I guess it's tubular cast on I've done actually, you do double knitting, meaning you do one row where you knit the knit stitches and slip the purl stitches with yarn in front, and then you do the same on the other side, but obviously because it's flat, you in essence have only done one row, and that's what sort of creates the stitches, I guess, that you need for it to be cast on properly. So I've done that, and then when you do that, because it's double knitting, the stitches can sit kind of funny. So when I started it, I'd switched around some of my knits and purls, which meant it didn't look seamless. I don't think anyone would have noticed. It was at the back of the neck, but I did, and it really irritated me. And then all of it basically I ended up ripping it out, because I was like, you know what, at this point I tried casting on like 9 times and I was ready to never knit on this project again. So what I did was, I was like, whatever, I just have to accept it. You know, at the end of the day, who's really gonna know? So I kind of made my peace with that. On top of that, I hadn't done the tubular knit stitches on the first round, so I also kind of felt like that didn't look too good either. So it was just getting worse and worse, basically. And then when I was getting ready for, you know, when I was pushing essentially the stitches onto my left needle to get ready to knit the magic loop, I dropped quite a few. Like, you know, sometimes when you do magic loop and you push it back, you just accidentally push it too far and all the stitches just fly off the needle. And in pure panic, I managed to pick some of them up and get it sort of fixed. But at the join where there was already laddering, the purl stitch on, you know, the final purl stitch on the round just disappeared. I think it dropped all the way down to the cast on edge, because silk is not as forgiving. So like in the marble sweater, I noticed that I must have picked up the sweater and not realised I'd dropped the stitch, and continued knitting for a whole round, and it hadn't even dropped anymore, because the mohair is so sticky, but there's no stickiness to silk. And so once you drop a stitch, you have to pick up really quickly and really carefully. And I was like, there's no way, I don't even know if you can, but I was like, I don't know a crochet hook way to pick up the Italian cast on edge and pick it all the way up, especially when there was no loop to pick up in. And the join was so bad, I'd messed up on the first round, and it was just that point where you're like, listen, this project is going to take so long that, you know, losing say a day of knitting, it's not going to be as bad as how much this is going to annoy me. So I ripped it out once again, tried casting on these needle once again, hit the same kind of issues, and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna have to accept that I'm gonna have to order a third needle to do the cast on so that I can actually get it done. So I ended up ordering basically a needle I trusted. So I ordered the Knit Pro Symphony in 2.5. yeah, in 2.5mm, and finally I succeeded, and that's how I got to the point I am now. I still think it took me 2 or 3 tries to get it right even on these, but once I got going it was absolutely fine, and I'm really glad that I just much prefer knitting on 40cm for anything where you can. I think for me it just, even though the needles are slightly shorter, I just think they lie nicer in your hands. So yes, that is all the struggle that I went through to get here. And as I said, last week I was honestly just so exhausted that each night I think I maybe did half a row. So it took me a while to get through the short rows, and I only really finished those this weekend. And now I'm just getting through. There's a lot of stitches, right? So doing the raglan just takes a long time. So far, obviously I've messed up where the short rows are, because essentially I think when you do your German short rows, you obviously have a double loop that you need to knit together, and I think I accidentally dropped some of them. So I'm going to see if I can't just sew that together on the other side, or if it maybe looks slightly nicer after washing. But yeah, I think this is one of those projects that are just always going to look nice after you block it, because the tension will even out a little bit more, because it does look a little bit oily where I've done some of the increases. So this is going to be my main focus in February. Essentially my goal is to not cast on or work on anything else till I'm done with the raglan, because when it's just round and round and round and round, it will be considerably easier, because I can more knit on it whenever, and I can more easily do a few rows here and there, because as of now it's still something that requires quite full attention. So that's what lives down here. Now, while I was waiting for the needles to come through, I did actually start another project that I think I have decided to frog, because I want to do something else. So this is the little beginnings of it. My original plan, the very original plan for this, was actually sweater number 11, which I'm desperate to knit after Rebecca from the Creator Bear has made one, but I don't think I'm gonna knit a roll neck in mohair just yet. I still think, while I'm not sensitive to this right now, I still think I'd be pushing it, because my neck is the most sensitive. It doesn't actually feel that itchy holding this up, so I don't know. I don't think I'm going to do a sweater number 11. I guess I have time to think about it. But this is basically a combination of Filcolana Peruvian Highland Wool in Nougat and Filcolana Tilia in the colour Light Truffle. I bought this January last year, so I've had this in my stash for a year, and I basically selected it because you need a lot of yarn for sweater number 11. And I was like, this is taking up a lot of room in my stash, so I'm gonna pick a project that takes up a lot of room. And then this got chosen. It's 2 very cool coloured browns, which when knitted up looks like this together, which is quite nice. It is a tiny bit cooler than I would usually go for, but I actually don't think it clashes with my hair. It just makes my hair look more golden, which I'm not going to complain about. So I actually cast on for the oversized seasons cardigan by Arwetta. I had actually already, so what you do for the oversized seasons cardigan is that you knit one half of the neckband, and then you pick up stitches, knit the other half of the neckband, then you pick up stitches along those 2 pieces and join all of them together. So essentially, you know, where the live stitches are, you have the live stitches that you knit across, then you pick up alongside the sort of neckband, and then you join in with the other neckband's live stitches, and that's where you begin. And then you do the sweater has like raglan and it's knitted in half fisherman's rib. I think the pattern has a lot of detail, but it's just not written in a way that I'm used to. If you followed me for a long time, you will probably realise I mainly knit Scandi patterns, and I don't think it's written particularly Scandi. I think at some points there are just things that is kind of implied that I would have made explicit, and sometimes there are things explicit that I would just have implied, and I think it's a preference as to like how you like to read a knitting pattern. So I had actually gotten to the point where I'd done 3 or 4 raglan increases, but I had just kind of messed up on the neckline. I'd messed up essentially when you establish the half fisherman's rib, she doesn't tell you if you start with, say, a knit or a purl. And so it didn't actually match as intended, and I didn't realise until I read the sort of next big paragraph, which I didn't presume was part of the previous paragraph, but it was, and it's telling you to be careful about how you start the half fisherman's rib so that the knit and purl stitches match, essentially, so that it looks even across. And yeah, I had already made a mistake that because of the way the neckband works, what I would recommend if you knit it is to count how many rows you make one and make the other one basically the same amount of rows, so that when you join them together, the join between them will sit as much straight in the back of your neck as possible. And I hadn't done that, so already when I picked up the stitches, it had become a tiny bit uneven just due to that fact. And then it didn't help that I didn't establish the half fisherman's rib wrong. And then I kind of reached that point again that while I'm always, you know, you're never keen to rip back a project, but I'm much more keen to rip it back when I very first begin than at the very end of it, I guess, because that just feels much worse, I think. So I just decided to rip it back and start all over, and this is as far as I got. So my plan has been for a while actually to get back to it, but when I have a little knitting group with certain podcasters, and if you ever hear my name mentioned by some of them, I'm sure you can guess my little knitting group. And we should probably speak about in the knitting group whether or not the membership is secret. I don't think it is. But anyway, we were speaking about sort of things that inspired us and like projects coming up. And I really, really love the sweater number 18 from My Favourite Things Knitwear, which is essentially just a very simple like pattern sweater using knits and purls. So it's not that it's particularly complex, but I just love the texture it creates. And she's bringing out a jacket version of it called Jacket Number 1. And as far as I can tell, the gauge is ever so slightly different, but the same yarns should be able to work. So I am currently trying to decide if I would prefer the sweater or the cardigan. Currently I'm leaning more towards the sweater because I think I would use that more than the cardigan. But I'd love to hear your opinions down below. The reason I've also kind of gone away from the oversized seasons cardigan is also my fear is that half fisherman's rib, just like it does here, and I know Lissy has spoken about it, it's quite a heavy stitch, you know, it's because it is so squishy and it's like ribbing, it does weigh on its own. And so you can, you know, you will probably find that it doesn't, you know, the way it looks across here on my sleeve where it has all the weight of the sweater, compared to here at the end of it, it's not going to look the same. And I'm nervous that in a cardigan form, you could end up with it kind of growing without you intending it to and struggling to keep the shape. So I feel like that's why I've kind of gone off it a little bit, though it was on my list for a while. So I don't know. And also it's just because I think it's, I'm not wanting to buy any more yarn. So actually, perfect segue to talk about what my plans are for Christmas in 2022. Like most you know knitting YouTubers and all of this, I have more than enough yarn. I probably have enough yarn to last me all of 2022. I'm just gonna let that sink in. I probably have more yarn than I can realistically, based on last year, knit up this year. And for me, that just made me realize I just need to take it down a notch. I just need to calm down a little bit in buying yarn and work through some of my stash, because all of the yarns in my stash are lovely and beautiful yarns, and there's no need to buy more when I do have yarn. That being said, I am not a big believer in ultimatums. I think if I told myself you may not buy any yarn in 2022, it would become really sour for me. It would, like, I think knowing I couldn't would make it worse than just saying, oh, I want to limit how much I buy, because I definitely find yarn shopping to be a lovely part of knitting, and I love thinking about what projects I want to make and to find a perfect yarn and a perfect colour and a perfect project and all of these things. So, yeah, I don't want to say I'm not buying any yarn, but essentially I'm aiming to buy as little as possible. And preferably, you know, most of my stash now does have a second strand if I think that the yarn itself will need it. And for any project that doesn't, I'm just gonna essentially wait until it's necessary, you know, wait until I'm literally ready to cast on the project, because I think another danger is buying for your future self. So buying a project's worth of yarn and not actually having empty enough needles to start knitting it, and then I think you end up kind of like what some of my stash is, which is I bought that for sweater number 11 before I really knew that maybe the mohair wasn't for me or whatever, and now I just have all this like sweater quantity of yarn and picking the project on all of this. So all of this to say that 2022 for me, I'm going to try really hard to knit through what I have. Towards the tail end of 2021, I definitely also got more into using those, you know, 1 or 2 balls of yarn in my stash, and I'm keen to do more of that in 2022 as well. So that does mean knitting just a few more accessories, knitting a few more gifts that are smaller scale, also because I think that will really help me to work through what I have, and to actually use again what's in my stash instead of constantly thinking of buying new. Again, this is not me saying I will not buy yarn, because I probably will, but so far so good. All of this is also helped by the fact that obviously we are due to get married this summer. We're hoping that, you know, third time's the charm, because we've postponed twice now, but currently as it stands, we will get married this summer. I also apologise, sometimes it's hard for me to know what the microphone picks up, but I can hear construction traffic outside, which has been a constant factor in my life for quite a long time. But anyway, so that's also why all of this rambles to say I don't think there'll be many acquisitions, and any that I have added, like anything, because I did have added yarn since the last time I filmed. When I was in Denmark, I did buy a few balls of yarn. Some of it you've already seen knit it up. So like the yarn for Ben's hat, I bought new. I bought some second strand stuff for yarn in my stash and all of this, but I'm thinking that I'll just show you that as and when I knit it up, because I think it would be a much better use of the podcast time. And yeah, this was way more chatting in this section than I kind of intended to. So I've also filmed for much longer than I was planning to. So I think it's time to quickly finish off with a tiny bit of a personal chat. So if that's not for you, you're welcome to leave. But yes, what's been going on in my life? So as I said, had a lovely Christmas and got back to work. At the moment, I'm still spending lots of time with my papa. She is in full teenage phase, meaning we were working a lot on having a puppy. Obviously, being from a working background, Fela was born on a farm to a working mum and dad. Her mum is a Labrador and her dad is a Border Collie. They are two very high energy and high drive dogs, and you can definitely tell she has that in her, that ability to really focus and switch on and be ready to go. And so a big responsibility of us as her owner is sometimes to teach her that you can just relax and take time to calm down. We're finding it, especially on walks, that she can be a bit of a nightmare sometimes because other dogs and people excite her so much. I swear to God, like she loves visitors. If any of you live close by and are in need of puppy cuddles, like, she loves it. Honestly, I don't think she's ever met someone she didn't like. And that makes it hard sometimes because, like, you take her for walks and I'm not going to go into a long rant about it because I do it way too much, but we're really struggling with finding that balance between teaching her that you should just walk past other dogs and not every dog you meet is the best friend that you have to play with, while also struggling with the fact that people have off-lead dogs that run up to other dogs, and it's really hard to, like, I actually had her at the vet today, so she was weighed today. She's 19 kilos, So she's a little chunk, and it's hard to hold 19 kilos that are wiggling and desperate to get out of your, out of your grab to go play with another dog. And you don't obviously want to get her so angry and frustrated that she lashes out. So we're finding that a bit of a struggle at the moment. Everything's there, so it will get better. So we're just sticking to it and sticking to all the training and all of this. Yesterday I took her, I had the day off because I'm getting new glasses, and in the morning her and I went on this lovely long walk together. I might put in the little clip of her absolutely sue-meing about the place. She just has so much energy, and I think we're starting to get to the point actually where I do find that she's like this in the afternoons, that she is quite good at just lying down, settling, being quiet, accepting how things are. So that does help a lot. But yeah, all of that is a bit of a struggle. However, I would say that at the moment I am doing better than I have in a long time. I'm finally starting to feel a little bit more like myself. I'm starting to get a few more bits done around the house, and I think that's really helping. So I'm trying to organise, basically currently I'm going through the kitchen, so I'm trying to do like a drawer or a shelf a day, because I'm sure we all know that thing. When we moved in, we just shoved everything in the cupboards as quickly as we could, and that was all well and fine. But now that we've lived here for a few months, like some of the cupboards, we haven't even looked at the contents in them. So it's probably time to reassess and get rid of things that we no longer need. And for other cupboards, it's just, what it's like, like a busy high traffic cupboard, you stuff all sorts of crap in. So I've been focusing on that more, and I've been trying to be really strict about my bedtimes and getting up and getting ready and looking more presentable. And I'm really finding that makes a difference for my mental health. I have spoken about mental health many times before in this podcast because I think it's really important. I often get messages from people saying that they have struggled, and I think it's really important to be honest that many people do. It's not strange to struggle. So, but yeah, it's kind of been nice to have a bit more, like to feel a bit more like I'm just managing more than I have for a long time. Things aren't seeming as difficult, and life isn't seeming as grey as it did for a little while. And I think some of the credit is certainly, that's certainly Fela's credit, because she needs me every single day. And while I'm not a big believer in like buy a dog to, solve any mental health issues, there's no doubt that having someone who relies on you for their care makes it much more motivating to get outside even if it's raining. So that's a little short but yet quite long life update. So yes, I think it's time for me to go. And it's been so lovely chatting to you today. I'm actually glad I refilmed because I wasn't 100% happy with the last episode either, and I should just learn that when I feel that way, it's just better just to redo it. So anyway, enough chat for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!